introduce to you Reverend Robert Farrell. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. I always get excited when I see the email from someone at Unity, and it's like, okay, what opportunity is knocking at the door here? Today, I'd like to take some time and talk about imperfection. We live in this westernized society where so much of it is about being perfect, and if you make a mistake or you have a personal flaw, then you have some work to do, or you're going to get compared or thought different of. And I wanted to do that a little bit with just weaving in a couple of stories and a little philosophy and theology together, and see where this all lands with each of you. I remember a morning when the light was soft and hesitant. It was slipping through the blinds in thin, slanting lines. You've probably seen that. On the kitchen table lay a small paper bag, its contents spilling quietly. There was a bruised apple, a half loaf of bread, and a note in child's uneven handwriting. For you, love always. My mind had been filled with the day ahead, the list, the measurable achievements, the errands that I had to run, when that simple gesture made everything pause. There was nothing polished or perfect in that offering. It was humble, it was messy, it was human, and yet it carried a gravity far greater than any display of mastery. And a realization that sinks into your bones is that the heart of love does not live in perfection, but in attentiveness, in care, in presence. There is a quiet path before dawn where the air is cool and still. Mist curls softly over the soil, and shadows will stretch like questions across the earth. And each rustle in the trees seems to whisper gently, nudging the restless parts of the mind that longs to prove, to achieve, to become more than we already are. Perfectionism puts all the emphasis, total reliance on me, on effort, on spiritual accomplishment even. It presses down on the heart, telling us that worth is earned by flawless execution, by measuring ourselves against invisible standards. But the wisdom literature invites us into a different rhythm, one in which holiness grows not from perfect deeds, but from surrender, from attentiveness, from receptivity. Even the call to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect speaks not of rigid control, but of completion that flows through our limitations, not to tell us that we are limited. And so we spend seasons of life trying to distance ourselves from the parts that don't fit the person we thought we were supposed to be. And in those times, we hustle for worthiness, constantly performing, perfecting, pleasing, and proving. Each act of striving leaves a subtle ache, a quiet hollowness, because it is effort untethered from love. And so we feel that ache. But the small, ordinary acts, the note on the counter, the spilled bread, the moments when attention rises naturally, reveal a different possibility. truly any spiritual perfection is, in truth, our ability to include, forgive, and accept our imperfections. And divine perfection, well, it is the ability to recognize, forgive, and include those perfections. Therese of Lisieux reminds us that we need to embrace imperfection in ourselves and in others. She taught that we grow spiritually much more by doing it wrong than by doing it right. Each misstep, each failed attempt, each crack in our intentions is not a blemish, it's actually a portal. And that's not what we hear in our westernized society. Leonard Cohen sings, "There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." So our imperfections are not failures to hide. They are gentle reminders. Human limitation is the very medium through which divine presence becomes palpable. Our ordinary flaws become portals to extraordinary understanding. I'm like, I want to hear the hallelujahs. It's like, okay, finally I can take a breath. I don't have to measure myself and wonder if what I'm doing next is going to be criticized or gossiped about later. Awareness of our humanity deepens our capacity for compassion and for solidarity. Our missteps become opportunities to cultivate empathy, to cultivate generosity and connection. And the wisdom of all this is that the cracks, the hesitations, the flaws that we so often hide are the very places where divine love most profoundly works on us. But how do we move from knowing this truth to living it, right? I always enjoyed coming into Unity because it talks about practical Christianity. And as I was writing this, I was like, my first version, I was like, no, I really need to get to the how. We can all talk about, how much the divine love loves us in our cracks, but it's like, okay, how? But at the heart of all this is what I do call a spirituality of imperfection. I think I learned that term from one of my teachers, Father Richard Rohr. But it's a way of living that embraces being perfectly imperfect. And the shift happens not through dramatic effort, but through a steady daily adjustment in how we hold ourselves. It unfolds, I'm going to share it in 3 movements. Nothing's linear in life, but we teach it linearly so that we can start to work with it. So first, we have to see the crack clearly. Before you can include or forgive imperfection, you must recognize it without turning away. We, in our American culture, we don't like that. We like to take our flaws and not talk to anybody about them and put them under the rug or in the closet or in the trunk or whatever your metaphor is. But this, really what I'm talking about here is the practice of attentive presence. You notice a moment of striving and emerging confusion inside or a personal flaw. And rather than adding a storyline of failure, you pause. You just name it gently. You let it be. You say, here is limitation. Here is a crack. You don't have to fix it. You observe the imperfection as something that simply is, not as a condemnation. And so this unguarded awareness opens a small, spacious gap between what happens and how you respond. we like to respond right away. Leave the gap. Then second, you allow the light to reach that wound, whatever it is, because forgiveness and inclusions are not acts of force, they're acts of permission. And this is the movement from effort to surrender. Once you've acknowledged the crack, you soften the inner impulse that wants to fix, conceal, or compensate. Let me pause here to speak to you men. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to fix it. But then at that point, you may quietly say, let this be as it is. In releasing control, you become receptive. You stop obstructing the light with frantic effort, and grace is then free to meet the imperfection directly. Third, you carry the crack forward with love. Because inclusion means allowing the imperfect element back into the flow of your life. This is where that flaw becomes a guide. The misstep is not erased, but integrated by divine love, becoming a source of compassion in a sense. As Therese of Lisieux reminds us, you do it wrong and let that very experience teach you about dependence, humility, and let it teach you about the vastness of love that doesn't depend on flawless performance. Hear that again. Love does not depend on flawless performance. Divine perfection holds imperfection without punishment. And because divine love does that, we can learn to do the same. So each ordinary lapse, each moment we fall short, is fertile ground for love to move. The lapse creates a rupture, a crack in the vessel of yourself or your relationships. And in that opening, we face a choice. We can attack or reattach quickly through justify, blame, or hide, suturing the rupture to restore a seamless illusion. But that choice closes the space that I was talking about. And it doesn't leave room for love to breathe. The courageous decision not to fix or hide, but to witness. To say, here I am. Here I am limited. And this isn't wallowing or self-loathing. It's creating a holy vacuum. And love absorbs a vacuum. And it moves in to fill the crack. And here is where we can understand the Japanese practice of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. When we stay open in our broken place, we're not leaving ourselves in pieces. We are mixing the lacquer of our honest attention with the gold of divine mercy and human forgiveness. We mend the seam not to disguise the break, like we like to do with super glue, right? But to adorn it. In that stillness of not striving, love flows in as the binding agent. Self-compassion, patience for others, the profound sense of being held. I sometimes want to find like a gold strand somewhere and just like wear it draped over my neck so that I can remind myself of all the broken pieces. The lapse becomes fertile ground only when we leave it open to be mended with gold. Love moves not just through the crack, but becomes the luminous vein that heals it, making the vessel more resilient, more beautiful, right? More sacred than before. So human limitation is the medium through which divine presence becomes palpable. Our missteps, our character flaws, our unknowing, all become opportunities to cultivate empathy and deeper connection. And this is the great mystery. We are who we are today, not in spite of our past imperfections, but precisely because of them. They do not define us, but they have undeniably shaped us, carving our depths of compassion, carving out new patience and understanding that a flawless life could have never formed. Now, to be vulnerable in the Latin, vulnere is wounded. It literally means able to be wounded, is what vulnerable is. But that's not a state of weakness, it's a state of holy openness. It is the ability to be wounded and not be diminished, because we know what divine love does. Now that doesn't mean to go out and put yourself out in every situation completely and fully. You're going to be vulnerable with a close knit of friends or family. Brene Brown says that if you have 2 or 3 that you can speak to and be, fully vulnerable, then you've been given gold itself, because it's rare to find one friend that you can do that with. It doesn't judge our imperfections from a distance. It enters into them, sits with us in our cracked places, and transforms the very wound into a wellspring of love, depth, and wisdom. And we don't have to beat ourselves up for them either, because without them we wouldn't become the person that we are. Our history of stumbles become the soil from which our present empathy grows. Yeah, it wasn't comfortable to go through that, right? But now I can move through it, get to the other side, and it has shaped me into a newer, richer, more compassionate, more precious presence in the world. I remember trying to bake bread once. I was following the recipe with care, only to have the dough refuse to rise. I was pressing and I was sighing and I was kneading. The loaf emerged lopsided and uneven. Yet, when you break off a piece and taste it, it nourishes. In that flawed loaf, there is a reflection of ordinary life. The unpolished, hesitant human gestures carry sacred potential. Now, the healing doesn't come quickly. The understanding doesn't come quickly. And it is through the little experiences that we begin to develop a larger patience for that knowing and healing, to where we can hold that crack open for a long time. Because there are spaces where divine presence, these cracks, these limitations, these lopsided loaves, those are the spaces where divine presence meets human limitation. And grace is made manifest not through perfection, but through attention and patience and the willingness to let the cracks exist. Imagine you're walking through the neighborhood. You might see a child stumble and a parent kneel to tie the little girl's shoe, brushing gently against a scraped knee. There's no ceremony, there's no grandeur, just an imperfect moment of care. And yet, the sacred felt present in the ordinary. And imperfection is not the absence of grace, but the very medium for its entry. Even our hesitations, our fears, and the quiet tug that we have toward self-protection, those are fertile grounds for possibility. They're not failures to hide, but openings through which divine love can enter. Each judgment, each sense of limitation, each character flaw that feels unhealable becomes a place for grace to work. What else would grace do? Right? And in the gentle persistence, the persistent presence of divine love, what we thought broken or irredeemable is quietly gathered and made whole. Right? That was in that song we were singing, right? Imperfection becomes sacred. We don't need to fix ourselves, perform perfectly, or erase our flaws. What we carry as shame or inadequacy is absorbed, redeemed, and held. And in this embrace, the heart learns to soften. We become less judgmental of ourselves. And we learn that vulnerability is no longer a weakness, but a conduit for transformation. Because life is not measured by flawless execution, but by the presence of love in our hearts and the willingness to allow grace to work through what feels broken. And this is the essence of a spirituality of imperfection. A way of living where we recognize that we are perfectly imperfect. Maybe you can say that now. I am perfectly imperfect. I am perfectly imperfect. And you are beautiful. And we can learn that every crack holds the promise of gold. So let your heart rest in the gentle rhythm of surrender. Let it rest in the gentle rhythm of attention. Let it rest in the open space of the crack. Because this is the way of living that sees divine love not as a distant idea, but as a gentle presence that integrates all of who we are. Perfectly imperfect. Our flaws are not obstacles. They are vessels for grace. Welcome to the gold. Thank you.
Thank you.